Welcome to TB Dahl Audiobooks. Before the story begins, please take a quick second to subscribe and leave a comment below. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now, enjoy the listen.
Chapter 12. The record Maren Lunde did not sleep. She sat in the back office of a 24-hour print shop on Torgata, her laptop open on a folding table between stacked boxes of card stock and the chemical smell of toner. Kjetil had left an hour ago to deliver encrypted drives to two locations, one to Aftenposten's deputy editor, Sigrid Dahl, at her home in Nordstrand, the other to a secure drop maintained by a media lawyer named Anders Brock, whose firm had handled national security leaks before. The photographs glowed on Maren's screen. She had sorted them into 3 folders. The first held the vault itself. Wide shots of the Norse Secure Solutions basement, steel shelving, archival boxes labelled with File 17 classification codes, a table where documents had been laid out under examination lights. The clinical precision of the arrangement told its own story. This was not a collector's private hobby. This was an intelligence operations working archive. The second folder held the individual documents. The Pavot baptismal record, page 7, the one Father Alexei had confirmed was surgically removed from the Helsinki Church archive, photographed front and back, the ink faded to brown, the entry for Alexei Mikhailovich visible beside the initials MAR, the genuine Michael Alexandrovich letter, 7 lines in a cautious hand, a DNA analysis report from a laboratory in Switzerland dated 14 months ago, confirming that 2 anonymous subjects designated R17 and E17 were biological twins with genetic markers consistent with verified Romanov line reference samples, Anna Nikolaison's letter to her children. The third folder held Henrik Rask's recording. Riley had photographed the device and transcribed the audio on the drive to Oslo. Rask's voice, flat and careful, naming Pavel Orlov as the source of the custodian index breach, naming the date, naming the price. Maren closed the third folder and opened a blank document. She had covered political scandals, intelligence leaks, asylum cases, and municipal corruption. She had never held a story that crossed this many borders, this many institutions, this many categories of law. This was not a single crime. It was a system of crimes wearing the disguise of statecraft. Her phone buzzed. Sigrid Dahl. I've seen the drive. And? Legal needs to review before we run anything. Brock is already on his way to my house. How much time do we have? Maren checked the clock on the wall. 4:17 a.m. The guard at the facility was secured, but conscious. Riley estimates someone checks the building by morning. Once Volkov's people realize the vault was entered and the documents were photographed, they'll move to discredit whatever we publish. We need to be first. Silence on the line for 3 seconds. Can we verify the baptismal record independently? Father Alexei Morozov in Helsinki can confirm the document was removed from his church archive. The guardianship transfer papers referencing the missing page are already in Riley's possession. The DNA report carries the name and registration number of a Swiss laboratory that can be contacted for confirmation. And the recording of Rask? Voice match will take longer, but the content is internally consistent with everything else. Rask names Orlov, dates the breach, and describes the mechanism. It's a deathbed insurance file. He knew he might not survive the meeting at the museum. Another pause. Maren could hear Sigrid breathing. Draft me 2 pieces. First, the criminal operation. The murder, the stolen archive, the kidnapping, the vault, the Russian media coordination. That's the news story. Hard evidence, named sources, documented acts. Second, the background. Who Riley Hunt and Elliot Harper are, what File 17 contains, what honest Russia is. That one needs more legal review. We publish the first piece at 7 a.m. The background goes up by noon if Broch clears it. Understood. Maren, one more thing. Yes. Is Riley Hunt claiming to be royalty? No. She's claiming someone tried to destroy the proof that she exists. The line went quiet for a beat. Write it that way. Maren wrote for 2 hours. The first article opened with the Norse Secure Solutions facility. She described the building, its location in Alnabru, its official function as a document storage company. She described the basement vault, the assembled archive, and the systematic collection of materials from across Europe. She named Henrik Rask as the murdered archivist whose death in the National Museum basement had been reported as an unexplained homicide 3 weeks earlier. She connected his killing to the theft of a master index that mapped the locations of historical documents held by a network of private custodians. She described the Porvo baptismal record, removed from a Finnish Orthodox Church archive after the theft of the index, recovered inside the Norwegian facility. She described the DNA report confirming that 2 individuals, identified by the designations R17 and E17, were biological twins with genetic markers matching verified Romanov reference samples. She described Tara Morgan's abduction, a Norwegian communications professional taken from an Oslo street by 2 men, held in the facility's basement for more than 48 hours, found and released by her friends during the same entry that uncovered the vault. She described the Russian media campaign, the coordinated articles framing Honest Russia as an extremist network, the anonymous telegram posts releasing partial photographs and fabricated genealogical charts, the diplomatic pressure on Norwegian authorities to treat the case as a counterintelligence matter rather than a criminal investigation. She named no intelligence agency directly. She wrote Russian-linked actors and an operation consistent with state-level coordination. Anders Brock would tell her how far she could push attribution when he finished his review. She did not use the word heir. She did not use the word throne. She did not speculate about succession, legitimacy, or political claims. The story was about crimes, murder, theft, kidnapping, forgery, intimidation, the systematic destruction of historical records across 3 countries by actors connected to Russian state interests. At 5:40 a.m., she emailed both drafts to Sigrid and Brock. At 5:52, she called Riley. Riley answered on the second ring. She had not slept either. She was sitting in the kitchen of an apartment in Rodeluca that belonged to one of Elliot's construction crew foremen, a man named Per, who asked no questions and left a key under the mat. First article is drafted. Sigrid is reviewing it with legal now. We want to publish at 7. What did you include? Everything we discussed. The facility, the vault, the documents, the kidnapping, the media campaign. I left the recording for the second piece because voice authentication takes longer and Broch wants independent confirmation before we name Orlov. What about the bloodline? I state that File 17 documents a Romanov-linked line and that Riley Hunt and Elliot Harper are identified within it as separated twins whose identities were altered in infancy. I don't characterize the claim. I don't say it's valid or invalid. I say someone thought it was important enough to kill for. Riley exhaled slowly. Through the kitchen window, the first grey light of morning pressed against the glass. That's right. I need your statement. Something short, clear, and controlled. Your voice, not mine. We'll run it as a sidebar. I know what I want to say. Send it to me by 6:30. I'll include it in the first publication. Maren. Yes? Thank you for believing this before you could verify it. I didn't believe it. I followed the evidence. That's different. The line went dead. Maren turned back to her laptop. Riley set her phone on the counter and picked up a pen. She had a legal pad from Pear's kitchen drawer, the kind with pale yellow pages and a red margin line. She had spent her professional life writing briefs, assessments, and strategic communications for clients who paid her firm to make complexity legible. She had written for governments, executives, and crisis teams. She had never written for herself. She started 3 times and crossed out each opening. The 4th time, she stopped thinking about audience. She wrote, "My name is Riley Hunt. I am a Norwegian citizen. I was born Sophia Anna Nikolaisen on September 14, 1999, in Oslo. I have a twin brother. His name is Elliot Harper. He was born Mikael Henrik Nikolaisen on the same date. We were separated as infants without our knowledge or consent. Our identities were changed. We grew up in different families, in the same city, unaware of each other's existence. This was done by an organization called Honest Russia, which believed it was protecting us from threats connected to our family history. I am not defending that decision. It was made without our participation and shaped our entire lives. Our family history includes a documented connection to the Romanov imperial line through a hidden descendant of Grand Duke Michael Alexandrovich. That connection is contained in a set of records known as File 17. I am not making a claim to any title, any throne, or any political authority. No one has asked me to, and I would refuse if they did. I am making this statement because people have been murdered to suppress these records. A civilian friend was kidnapped. Historical documents were stolen from archives across Europe. A coordinated media campaign attempted to discredit us before we had spoken a single public word. The only claim I am making is the right to know who I am. The only demand I am making is that the crimes committed to hide this information be investigated by competent authorities under Norwegian and international law. File 17 belongs to history. Our lives belong to us. She read it once, changed 2 words, and sent it to Maren. At 6:14 a.m., Elliot walked into Pear's kitchen. He had been up since 4, moving through the building and the surrounding streets on foot, identifying sight lines and approach vectors. His jacket was damp from rain. Anything? Clean. No watchers on the block. Gear's contact at PST says there's been no alert issued for this address. We're invisible for now. Riley handed him her phone with the statement on the screen. He read it standing, one hand braced against the counter. His jaw tightened at the second paragraph. He read the whole thing without interruption, then set the phone down. You didn't mention the bloodline details? Michael, the baptismal record, the DNA. Maren's article carries that. My statement is about the crime and our right to the truth. If I start laying out genealogical evidence, I become a claimant. I refuse to be positioned that way. Elliot studied her face. Our parents, yours and mine. I didn't name them. They'll be identified within hours once this goes live. I know. That's why you need to call them first. Elliot pulled out the prepaid phone he'd been using since Helsinki. I talked to Thomas at 5 this morning. He and Ingrid are driving to his sister's cabin in Telemark. They'll be off-grid by noon. My parents. I couldn't reach them. Tara's trying Marianne's mobile. Tara needs to be out of Oslo. Geir is handling that. He's driving her to a friend's property in Drammen this morning. Somewhere rural, private road, no digital footprint. Maren's photographer, Kjetil, is going with them. Geir will stay until we can arrange something more formal. Riley processed this. In the architecture of crisis management, Elliot's mind worked differently from hers. She built arguments, frameworks, public positions. He built perimeters. What about surviving custodians? Katarina sent warnings to the 9 reachable contacts through the church network before she went to the parish house in Helsinki. 7 confirmed the scatter protocol. The Tallinn custodian is dead. The Paris contact surfaced overnight. She'd gone to ground on her own after seeing the Russian media articles. She's in Brussels now, staying with a relative. Father Alexei. Still with Katarina in Helsinki. Father Alexei's church community is providing cover. Katarina's wound was treated by a doctor connected to the parish. She's mobile. Riley looked at the clock above the stove. 6:22 a.m. 38 minutes. At 6:48 a.m., Anders Brock called Maren. I've reviewed the first piece. You can publish with 3 modifications. Maren listened, made changes, and sent the final version to Sigrid at 6:53. Sigrid read it in 4 minutes. Run it. At 7:01 a.m., the article went live on Aftenposten's digital platform. The headline was measured, the language precise. Hidden archive recovered in Oslo facility. Murder, kidnapping, and cross-border evidence theft. linked to suppression of historical Romanov records. Below the headline, Riley's statement ran as a boxed sidebar with a small photograph Maren had taken on her phone outside the facility. Riley's face in profile, her hair pulled back, the grey pre-dawn light on the concrete wall behind her. Riley saw the article at 7:04. She read it twice, checking Maren's language against the evidence they had provided. The reporting was exact. No speculation, no sentimentality, no dynasty talk. Just the documented trail. A dead archivist, a stolen index, a kidnapped woman, a facility full of seized records, and a coordinated campaign to make all of it disappear. Her statement sat in its box like a deposition. She closed the laptop and waited. The first response came at 7:23 a.m. NRK's online desk picked up the story and ran a breaking news summary linking to Aftenposten's piece. By 7:40, Dagbladet had published its own summary, adding that Oslo police had previously sought 2 unnamed witnesses in connection with Henrik Rask's death at the National Museum. By 7:51, VG had identified the Norse Secure Solutions facility and sent a camera crew to Alnabru. At 8:06, Oslo Police District issued a brief statement confirming that officers had been dispatched to a commercial property in Alnabru following information received from a media outlet. The statement said the investigation into Henrik Rask's death at the National Museum remained active and that police were aware of new information that might be connected. At 8:14, the Norwegian Police Security Service released a statement through its communications office. It confirmed that PST was aware of the media reporting and was assessing the information in consultation with relevant international partners. The statement used the word assessing 3 times and committed to nothing. At 8:31, the Russian embassy in Oslo released a statement calling the article an irresponsible fabrication designed to damage Russian-Norwegian relations. The statement described Honest Russia as a discredited émigré organization with extremist connections, and said that Russia categorically denied any involvement in criminal activity on Norwegian soil. It called the Romanov bloodline claim a fairy tale manufactured for political purposes. Riley read the embassy statement on her phone. The language was fast, pre-drafted, loaded with counterframing. Volkov's communications people had prepared it in advance. They had expected this moment, perhaps not this specific morning, but this general eventuality. The response template existed because the contingency had been gamed. But the template had a problem. It denied everything uniformly. It treated the kidnapping, the murder, the stolen documents, and the media campaign as a single fabrication rather than addressing each element separately. That told Riley the embassy had not yet received a calibrated response from Moscow. They were working from the generic denial protocol, while Volkov's operation scrambled to assess what had actually been exposed. They're using the blanket denial. Elliot looked up from the table, where he had been mapping locations on a paper street atlas. Meaning? They deny the kidnapping, the murder, the vault, and the bloodline all in the same breath. That's a mistake. The kidnapping is independently verifiable. Tara was held in that building for over 48 hours. Police will find physical evidence. Once any single element of the denial collapses, the rest comes into question. How long before they switch to a more targeted response? Depends on how fast Volkov can communicate with the embassy through secure channels. Hours, not days. By this afternoon, they'll shift from blanket denial to selective challenge. They'll concede the facility exists, argue the documents were acquired through legitimate intelligence cooperation, and claim the kidnapping was actually a voluntary meeting that ended badly. Can they make that work? Not if Tara gives a statement first. Riley texted Gear's number, the one Elliot had given her. Tara needs to give a police statement about the abduction today. Before noon. Before the embassy response can be tailored. Can you facilitate? The reply came in 90 seconds. Already arranged. Drammen Police, 10 a.m. Formal interview with legal representation. Tara is ready. At 9:15 a.m., Maren published the second piece. This one was longer, more structural, and had passed through 2 additional legal reviews. Brock had insisted on redacting 3 names connected to Honest Russia's surviving custodians for safety reasons. Maren agreed. The article laid out the architecture. It described Honest Russia's founding in 1919 Helsinki. It explained the table of witnesses, 7 seats created to divide control of evidence among archivists, keepers, priests, bankers, officers, and witnesses. It described the empty chair, reserved for the hidden descendants, never occupied. It named the factions: keepers, reformists, restorationists, opportunists. It described how each faction had a different vision for File 17 and for Riley and Elliot. It named Viktor Sokolov and the forged Michael Alexandrovich letter. Maren reproduced Riley's textual analysis alongside images of both versions, the genuine 7-line note and the expanded forgery. She noted the linguistic anachronisms, the handwriting inconsistencies, and the rhetorical language that contradicted everything documented about Michael's character and political restraint. It named Pavel Orlov and described the sale of the custodian index. Maren included a transcription of the relevant section of Henrik Rask's recording, noting that voice authentication was pending, but that the content had been independently corroborated by surviving Honest Russia members. It described the separation of Riley and Elliot as infants. It named no adoptive families, at Riley's request, but it confirmed that the separation was performed by the Northern Table of Honest Russia, and that both children were placed under new identities within Norway. It described the fate of custodians. Father Tobias Kusk in Tallinn, dead. His archive materials, missing. 2 other custodians who had experienced break-ins at their homes. 7 who had executed a scatter protocol in time to relocate their materials. And it quoted Anna Nicolaison's letter. Not all of it, 3 sentences carefully selected by Riley. You were separated because we believed ignorance would keep you alive. We called that mercy. It was not mercy. Maren attributed the letter to the biological mother of the twins, a Norwegian researcher who discovered her family's connection to File 17 and whose current status remains unconfirmed. The article carried no photographs of Riley or Elliot beyond the profile image from outside the facility. It did not reproduce the DNA report in full. It did not publish the baptismal record, though it described its contents. Everything was held at 1 degree of remove, enough to prove the story's foundation, not enough to turn Riley and Elliot into icons. By 10:30 a.m., the story had crossed into international coverage. Reuters ran a wire summary. The BBC posted a news alert. The Guardian published a preliminary analysis under the headline, Oslo discovery raises questions about Russian intelligence operations in Scandinavia. The New York Times contacted Maren's office requesting comment from Riley Hunt. Norwegian broadcast media ran the story on every cycle. NRK's morning show brought in a historian of Russian émigré movements who confirmed that organizations matching Honest Russia's description had existed since the 1920s. TV2 interviewed a former PST analyst who said the recovery of stolen foreign archives on Norwegian soil would require formal diplomatic and legal responses. At 10:47, Eriksson and Lindgren, Riley's former employer, released a statement saying the firm had no prior knowledge of Ms. Hunt's personal history, and that her suspension had been a precautionary measure. The statement was 12 lines of nothing, designed to create distance without creating liability. At 11:03, Elliot's construction company issued an even shorter statement, confirming that Elliot Harper was a valued employee on authorized leave, and that the company had no comment on media reporting unrelated to its operations. At 11:15, the Russian embassy released a second statement. This one was different from the blanket denial issued 4 hours earlier. Riley read it on the kitchen table. The second statement no longer denied the existence of the Norse Secure Solutions facility. Instead, it described the facility as a private commercial property with no connection to the Russian state. It acknowledged that media reports had raised questions about certain historical documents, but stated that the authenticity of materials recovered from an unverified private collection cannot be assumed. It called the DNA report unsubstantiated, and the Romanov bloodline claim a well-known genre of fraud that has recurred throughout the 20th century. It did not mention Tara Morgan. They've dropped the kidnapping from the denial. Elliot looked up. That means they know Tara is giving a statement. They're cutting the abduction loose as an element they can't defend. They'll blame it on private contractors acting outside any authorized scope. Norse Secure Solutions. Shell company. They'll sacrifice it. The employees will disappear into jurisdictions where Norwegian warrants don't reach. The facility becomes an embarrassment attributed to freelance operators, not state policy. Can they make that stick? Riley set the phone down. Only if the facility is the only evidence. It's not. The stolen baptismal record from Porvoo links directly to the custodian index, which links to Henrik Rask's murder, which links to the envelopes that brought us to the museum in the first place. The chain is documented. You can deny one link. You can't deny all of them without a coherent alternative explanation for why each event happened independently. Elliot nodded. He had pulled on a clean shirt from Pear's closet and looked almost settled, which Riley knew was misleading. His eyes moved to the window every 40 seconds. Volkov will produce one. Yes, but it takes time to build a counter-narrative that accounts for every piece of evidence we've released. Maren's structure was deliberate. She organized the story around criminal acts, not around the bloodline. That forces the denial to address crimes, not genealogy. You can't wave away a kidnapping with a press release. At 11:40, Geyer called Elliot. Tara finished her statement at Drammen Police. 2 hours. Full account. The officers are transmitting to Oslo Police District and PST simultaneously. They've assigned a liaison. How is she? Steady. Angry. She described the men who took her, the vehicle, the building, the room, the conditions. She identified one of the guards by a tattoo on his left forearm. Drammen Police took photographs of the bruising on her wrists. Is she safe? For now. The property in Drammen is clean. No digital trail. Kjetil is with her, and my contact from the site is staying overnight. I'll rotate back this evening. The Hunts? Marianne Hunt answered her phone 20 minutes ago. She and Eric are at a hotel in Lillehammer. They saw the Aftenposten article. Eric wants to talk to Riley. Not yet. Not on any phone connected to their names. Tell them to stay in Lillehammer and register under a different name if they haven't already. No credit cards. Elliot. What? Your parents are asking for you? Elliot's hand tightened around the phone. Tell them I'm fine. Tell them I'll call when it's safe to call. He hung up and looked at Riley. Marianne and Eric are in Lillehammer. Thomas and Ingrid are in Telemark. Everyone is accounted for. Riley watched his face. The tight line of his jaw, the slight drop of his shoulders when Gear mentioned his parents. He processed concern the same way he processed structural load. Silently, beneath the surface, where the weight distributed itself across a framework no one else could see. We should eat something. He blinked, as if the suggestion belonged to a language he'd temporarily forgotten. There's bread in Pear's freezer. They ate standing at the counter. Toast with butter and cold cheese, the kind of meal that existed only as fuel. The kitchen radio played NRK's noon bulletin. The Aftenposten story led. The anchor summarized the key points. The facility, the recovered documents, the murder connection, the abduction. A correspondent at the Russian embassy reported that the ambassador had cancelled a scheduled afternoon event. A political commentator noted that PST's initial framing of honest Russia as a potential extremist concern now appeared premature, given the evidence of Russian-linked criminal activity targeting the same organization. Then, Aftenposten has published a personal statement from Riley Hunt, one of the two individuals at the center of the case. in which she explicitly states that she is not making a claim to any title or political authority. Hunt describes the situation as a matter of personal truth and criminal accountability. Riley listened to the anchor read her words back to her in a newsroom cadence. File 17 belongs to history. Our lives belong to us. The line sounded different spoken by someone else. Smaller, more exposed. At 12:30, the international response intensified. The Estonian government confirmed, through its foreign ministry, that it was aware of reports concerning the death of a private citizen in Tallinn, who may have been connected to historical archival networks. It offered cooperation with Norwegian authorities. The Finnish Foreign Ministry released a short statement confirming that Finnish police had received inquiries from Norwegian counterparts regarding unauthorized access to a church archive in the Helsinki metropolitan area. It noted that Finland would cooperate fully under existing mutual legal assistance frameworks. At 12:45, an anonymous Russian telegram channel, one of the accounts that had earlier distributed fabricated genealogical charts, posted a new message. It accused Maren Lunde of being a Western intelligence asset, described Aftenposten as a NATO propaganda outlet, and claimed that Riley Hunt was a CIA-trained operative deployed to destabilize Russian domestic politics through a manufactured royal hoax. The post was shared 6,000 times in 40 minutes. It was also immediately screenshotted and archived by Maren's verification partners in London and Amsterdam, who logged it as evidence of the coordinated disinformation campaign described in the original article. At 1:04 p.m., the BBC published an expanded piece, including a brief interview with a genealogical historian who confirmed that DNA comparisons with verified Romanov reference samples were technically possible and had been performed in academic contexts since the 1990s. The historian said that without examining the specific report referenced by Aftenposten, she could not comment on its validity. But she noted that the claimed methodology was consistent with established scientific practice. At 1:17, the New York Times ran a front-page digital story. Norwegian police investigate alleged Russian operation to suppress Romanov records. Riley did not read it. She was on the phone with Maren. The second verification partner, the Dutch consortium, has confirmed the baptismal records paper, ink composition, and binding marks are consistent with early 20th century Russian Orthodox parish records. They want to examine the original, but based on the high-resolution photographs, their preliminary assessment supports authenticity. How quickly can they issue a public statement? They're drafting it now. They'll publish on their own platform by 3 p.m. Central European Time. Good. That forces Volkov's team to address material authenticity, not just political framing. Riley, there's something else. Viktor Sokolov released a video statement an hour ago. Riley went still. What did he say? He praised the exposure of File 17. He called you and Elliot the living continuation of Russia's true history. He invited you to address a gathering of the Restoration movement in Geneva next month. Riley closed her eyes. He's using the article to validate his own agenda. His forged letter was discredited in my second piece. He's ignoring that and treating the broader story as confirmation of everything the restorationists believe. Of course he is. For Sokolov, the forgery doesn't matter because to him the underlying claim is true. He'll argue the spirit of the letter was correct, even if the text was fabricated. Do you want to respond? No, silence is the response. If I engage with Sokolov, I become part of the monarchist conversation. Every word I give him is a word he can reframe. Understood. I'll note in my follow-up coverage that neither you nor Elliot has responded to Sokolov's invitation. At 2 p.m., Detective Inspector Karin Nordahl called Maren Lunde's office number and left a message requesting that Riley Hunt and Elliot Harper contact Oslo police at their earliest convenience. The message was professional, neutral, and carried a case reference number. It did not describe them as suspects. It did not use the word witnesses. It used the phrase persons of significant interest. Maren relayed the message to Riley. They want to interview us." Elliot looked up from the paper atlas he had been annotating with colored pencils from Pear's junk drawer. "Under what status?" "The message doesn't say, but the phrasing tells me they've moved beyond the original Rask case. They're treating this as a broader investigation. If they wanted to arrest us, they'd have issued a warrant, not left a voicemail. We should go in, but on our terms. I'll ask Brock to represent us. He knows the legal terrain, and his involvement signals we're cooperating voluntarily, not being compelled." Elliot capped his pencil. "When?" "Tomorrow morning. That gives us tonight to finish securing everyone, and ensures the second wave of evidence is already public before we sit in an interview room." At 2:34 p.m., Geir Halvorsen sent Elliot an encrypted message through the prepaid phone network they had established. Drammen secure. Tara resting. Kjetil on watch. Your parents confirmed at cabin, phone off, neighbors aware. Hunt parents moved from Lillehammer Hotel to private house belonging to a retired judge. Eric Hunt knows. No forwarding address registered. Maren's editor has private security at Aftenposten building. Standard protocol for sensitive stories. Elliot read the message twice, then deleted it. He walked to the kitchen window and looked down at the street. A woman walked a dog past the building. A delivery van turned the corner. Rain collected in the gutters, pooling around a blocked drain near the curb. Normal traffic. Normal movement. Normal city. He had spent 3 weeks running. Through basements, across borders, through forests and ferries and churches. He had cut padlocks in courtyards and crawled through maintenance corridors. He had watched men follow him through construction sites and stood in vaults filled with stolen records. Now the running had stopped, and the evidence was in motion, moving through newsrooms and police channels and international networks at a speed he could not control and did not need to. His role had shifted. Not less important. Different. The threat had not disappeared. It had changed shape. Volkov's operation could no longer function in silence. But men who lost the advantage of silence sometimes reached for louder tools. Elliot pulled out his phone and called Geir. "I need one more thing." "Name it." The custodians who confirmed the scatter protocol. 7 people holding pieces of File 17 in new locations across Europe. If Volkov can't destroy the evidence through the archive chain, he might try to reach them directly. "What do you want?" "Contact information for each, routed through Katarina's church network. I want to know their current status, their security situation, and whether local authorities have been informed of the threat." That's a lot of trust to ask from people who've spent their lives hiding. Tell Katarina to explain that the hiding is over. The question now is whether they're hiding alone or protected. Geir was quiet for a moment. "I'll reach Katarina by 4. At 3:12 p.m., the Dutch Verification Consortium published its preliminary assessment. The statement, posted on the consortium's website and distributed to its media partners, confirmed that the high-resolution photographs of the Porvoo baptismal record showed material characteristics, paper composition, ink degradation patterns, binding marks, and script style, consistent with early 20th century Russian Orthodox parish documentation. The statement noted that a definitive authentication would require physical examination of the original, but described the photographic evidence as strongly suggestive of a genuine historical document. At 3:29, the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson held a press briefing in Moscow. She described the Aftenposten reporting as a coordinated provocation by hostile media elements seeking to interfere in Russian domestic affairs. She said Russia reserved the right to take appropriate measures to protect its interests and its historical heritage from falsification and political exploitation. She did not mention the facility. She did not mention Tara Morgan. She did not mention Henrik Rask. At 3:41, Pacific Standard Time held a brief press conference at its Oslo headquarters. The deputy director, a grey-haired woman named Liv Strand, stood behind a podium and read from a prepared text. The Police Security Service confirms that it is aware of media reporting concerning the recovery of historical materials from a commercial facility in Alnabru, Oslo. PST is in contact with Oslo Police District and relevant international partners. We are assessing whether the reported events involve foreign intelligence activity on Norwegian territory. We will not comment on operational details at this time. A reporter asked whether PST had previously assessed Honest Russia as a potential extremist organization. PST routinely assesses information related to national security. Previous assessments reflect the information available at the time they were made. Another reporter asked whether PST was investigating Russian intelligence activity connected to the case. I will not comment on specific intelligence assessments. A third reporter asked whether Riley Hunt and Elliot Harper were under investigation. They are not suspects in any PST investigation at this time. That sentence traveled faster than anything else, Strand said. By 4 p.m., the architecture of denial had begun to fracture. The blanket embassy denial was already obsolete. The shifted second statement, conceding the facility while questioning the documents, lost ground when the Dutch consortium confirmed the baptismal record's material authenticity. The Russian media counter-narrative, which framed the entire story as a Western intelligence fabrication, collided with Tara Morgan's police statement, the facility's physical evidence, and the documented cross-border pattern of evidence theft. Volkov could still deny the bloodline. He could still argue the DNA was unreliable, the documents were planted, the genealogy was fabricated, and the entire operation was a provocation designed by Western services to embarrass Russia. But he could no longer deny that someone had assembled a vault full of historical records in an Oslo basement. He could no longer deny that a Norwegian woman had been held in that building against her will. He could no longer deny that an archivist had been murdered in the National Museum 3 weeks before the vault was discovered. The cover-up had become the evidence. At 5:17 p.m., Katarina called from Helsinki. Riley answered. "I've seen the articles." Katarina's voice was thinner than it had been at the safe house. The wound, the sleeplessness, the long weeks of running. "You controlled the narrative well." "It's not controlled. It's released. There's a difference." "I know. That's what frightens me." "The custodians?" Elliot's message reached all 7 through the parish network. 5 have confirmed they are in contact with local authorities or trusted legal representatives. 2 are moving to secondary locations and will confirm within 24 hours. The Paris custodian. In Brussels. Safe. She's spoken with a Belgian lawyer who specializes in cultural property protection. The documents she holds are being inventoried and photographed. Father Alexei. Resting. His parish community has been extraordinary. He asked me to tell you something. Riley waited. He said the baptismal record survived 100 years in his care. He said that losing it to Volkov broke something in him that he thought was unbreakable. He said seeing it photographed in that vault, knowing it exists, knowing it was read and recorded before it could be destroyed, gave him back something he thought was gone. Riley pressed her palm against the kitchen counter. "Tell him the record is part of the public file now. It can't be unseen." "I will." Silence for several seconds. Katarina. Honest Russia is in the articles. The factions, the table, the separation, Orlov, everything. "I know. The organization can't function in its current form after this." "It hasn't functioned for years, perhaps decades. Henrik understood that. It's why he sent the envelopes alone." "What happens now? To the keepers, the reformists, the rest?" "I don't know. Some will retreat. Some will come forward. Sokolov will try to claim the moment. Orlov will disappear if he hasn't already. The keepers who remain will do what they've always done. They'll protect whatever is left." "And you?" "I voted against separating you. I've spent 27 years carrying that vote. This morning, when I read your statement, I thought, she did not need us. She needed us to stop." Riley had no answer for that, not yet. The weight of Katerina's confession, and its inadequacy, would need time she didn't have this afternoon. Rest, heal. I'll be in touch when I can. She hung up. Elliot returned from outside at 5:45. He had walked a wide perimeter around Pear's building, checking for surveillance, running a counter-pattern through the neighborhood grid the way he'd been trained. He found nothing. The street was empty of threat, or appeared to be. He found Riley at the kitchen table, the laptop closed, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had gone cold. Anything? Clean. Gare. Everyone is accounted for. Tara's statement is in the system. Our parents are off-grid. Maren has security. The custodians are warned. Riley looked at him. Nordahl wants to interview us tomorrow. Brock will represent us. Good. The story is everywhere, Elliot. Every news cycle, every platform, every country that has a correspondent in Scandinavia. By tomorrow, everyone who reads a newspaper will know our names. Our real names, or the ones we grew up with? Both. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her. The atlas lay open between them, annotated with routes, safe locations, and the names of people who had helped them. A record of movement, fear, and borrowed trust. I never wanted any of it, he said. The bloodline, the history, the symbolism. I still don't. I'm a construction engineer. I build things. I read load calculations and argue with subcontractors about rebar spacing. I know.
The story continues in the next chapter, so make sure to subscribe, leave a comment with your thoughts, and share this video with fellow book lovers.